Pride Month kicks off around the world today, aimed at spotlighting the struggles and accomplishments of the LGBTQ plus community. ABC News contributor LZ Granderson is marking the occasion with the launch of his new podcast, Life Out Loud with LZ Granderson. Now, the podcast is all about preserving the history of the community and celebrating the joys of living life out loud. Take a listen.
Underrepresented, untold, undiscovered. These are the stories I want to tell. I'm LZ Granderson, host of a new podcast from ABC Audio with a simple mission: to preserve the history of the LGBTQ community. We're kicking off Pride Month with the 2-episode premiere of Life Out Loud with me, LZ Granderson, on June 1st. New episodes drop every Thursday in June, and the celebration just keeps rolling right into July. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
And LZ Granderson joins me live now to tell us more all about it. LZ, first of all, congratulations. How do you feel?
I feel excited. You know, I'm really excited for the ABC Pride team that really rallied together to help put this podcast together. I know obviously my name is attached to it, and you know, it was my idea. But this would not be here without so many incredible and talented individuals within the ABC Disney family who sacrifice their own personal time and weekends and hours on holidays to help put this together. So I'm excited for myself, but I'm more excited for them because they pour so much of themselves into getting these stories out there. So
tell me about the title. Why did you decide on Life Out Loud? What does that mean to you?
You know, it means a lot of things to me. The first thing I wanted to do was to make sure that any podcast that I was attached to that dealt with the LGBTQ community wasn't just about our griefs, our losses, our disappointments, and our pains. I certainly remember growing up in the 90s and into the 2000s that LGBTQ people, especially gay men, were either comedic relief or dying. We weren't allowed to have complete lives. Will and Grace, for some reason, a good-looking lawyer in the heart of Manhattan, had a difficulty actually being seen in bed with another man, which is a world I am not familiar with. But that's sort of the world that we have been seeing within the public. So the ideal of Life Out Loud is to be able to show our whole selves, our true selves, and not just a sanitized version to make heterosexual and cisgender people feel better.
So you sat down with some big names. Are there some interviews that kind of stick out to you? And was there a common thread that you found emerging as you're hearing more and more about people's stories?
Oh man, asking me for my favorite conversation from season 1 is like asking for my favorite child. Actually, it's not, because I only have one child, so I know who the favorite child is because I only have one.
That one's easy.
That one's easy. Obviously, you know, Dr. Fauci is a rock star, has been a rock star, but being able to revisit the early days of the AIDS crisis with him was really informative, painful, but also informative. I was really into the interview with Sherry Cola, the star of the hit show Good Trouble. She's a bisexual, Asian American, queer woman who, you know, was able to talk about a whole litany of conversations, including anti-Asian, crimes, hate crimes, that unfortunately have been, you know, peppered around the nation essentially since the beginning of the pandemic. So we get serious on some topics. We certainly have a lot of fun on topics. But what I love about season 1 in particular is that we really dive headfirst into intersectionality. So even though this is about LGBTQ community and pride, there's so many more aspects that we are attached to and connected with that we get to explore this podcast. And I'm just happy to be a vessel for these conversations.
And now in the press release, you just mentioned the AIDS epidemic. You mentioned that in the press release as well. And you said we lost so many stories to the AIDS epidemic, violence, harassment, and silence due to fear. So how are you hoping to both combat that and raise awareness about it now?
Well, number one, simply being able to live life out loud with our guests, to talk about our history and our past. You know, you just did a segment talking about the Tulsa massacre that unfortunately happened 100 years ago this weekend. A lot of people don't know about that massacre because it's not being taught in our history books, it's not being taught in school. Similarly, a lot of people don't know about LGBTQ history. A lot of people are, only think of LGBTQ people when it comes to Stonewall and AIDS. and then marriage equality. And that's essentially it. So hopefully this podcast joins the whole litany of docuseries and documentaries and other podcasts that are trying to rally together our history to make it known, not simply because we want to puff our chest out about our contributions to society, though that is important, but it's also important so that we don't repeat the same mistakes and that young queer kids can see a reflection of themselves throughout history and not grow up thinking they're alone. So this podcast and me along with the team, our goal is obviously to celebrate life out loud, but it's also to make sure that we do what Harvey Milk encouraged all of us to do when he was running for office, and that is giving people hope. We still got to give people hope. I know we've got a lot of victories. I know that Lil Nas X is gyrating with the devil and all of that, but that does not mean that the LGBTQ plus community has full equality, and I'm hoping to draw attention to some of the areas where we fall short as a nation.
Well, and so let's expand on that a little bit, because it's been over 50 years since the Stonewall riots, when members of the gay community stood up to being subject to police raids just for being gay. So how far have we come as a nation on equality for the LGBTQ plus community, and how far do we have left to go?
Oh boy, how far we have left to go? That is a very complicated question, because where we're going, it all depends upon who you're asking on the road or on the journey. We're not a monolithic group of people. We are connected in our desires to want full equality, but how we go about it and what that looks like varies from person to person, from situation to situation. I can tell you from our reporting, numerous times I was reminded by trans people in our community, particularly trans women of color, who didn't give a damn about marriage equality because they were just trying to eat or just trying to survive. Their issues and their concerns may be slightly different than someone who is in a monogamous marriage relationship who's concerned about coming out and being fired as a teacher, for instance. They have a different level of concern. So there are a lot of different answers to that question. I'm not trying to duck it. I'm not trying to split hairs. I'm just trying to emphasize that we're at different points within this struggle for full equality. But ultimately, the goal of the entire community is to have full equality for everyone, which I would think is a goal not just for the LGBTQ plus community, but for Americans in general. And as far as where we are today, still in half the country, depending upon your employer, you can be fired for being gay or being trans or being bi. You could lose your housing. We obviously, as I talked about earlier, just having our history denied in school and in the teachings is an erasure of a whole community and our contributions that has long-lasting impact. In the state of Arizona, for instance, there was actually a local state official who tried to get the word homosexuality banned from sex education classes. Imagine teaching sex education classes without using the word homosexuality. That's what that one local official tried to do. Fortunately, she was forced to walk those statements back. But it's just a glimpse into how far officials are still going to try to deny just our rights, but our very existence. So I understand a lot of my queer brothers and sisters are disappointed we won't be able to march. A lot of us are still doing pride marches because of the pandemic virtually. But that should not mean that the importance of pride should be denounced or that the importance of pride has somehow lost its meaning. Because the most important weapon that we have against inequality and against oppression, against people like that official I talked about in Arizona, is coming out and being proud by pushing back against these laws, pushing back against these narratives, pushing back against this violence. So I'm happy that we're launching during Pride, if for no other reason to remind people that it's still important that we are out and that we are proud and that we're living our lives out loud.
All right, and you sure are, LZ. Thanks so much for joining us. Always great to have you.
Great, thank you so much for having me. And listen to the podcast.
Absolutely. I'm about to plug it right now. Be sure to check out Life Out Loud with LZ Granderson. It's debuting today. You can listen for free on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and all other major listening platforms. And we cannot wait to listen in. LZ, thanks again.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.